Hi Kapil, nice to have you. All right, let's see if there's anybody else joining. Otherwise, we'll start with today's class. Kindly please like the video as soon as you join so that I know you're there. All right, if you have any doubts from previous classes, now is the time. And please comment if you have any questions. We'll begin. And so this is the last class uh, for Kotlin, which is the second part of OOPS concepts. And today we'll be discussing about interfaces, abstract class, and seal class. So, cool. Okay, so I guess let's begin with the class. Hello, Mitansh. All right, cool. So let's begin with today's class. I'll switch over to IntelliJ IDE. And please let me know if you cannot see this screen. The window will go black for a moment, but then it will come back again, I guess. So don't worry about it. Okay, so yes. So here's a simple class file. This is what we did yesterday. We saw how to create a class. We saw how to add constructors, primary constructors, and secondary constructors. We created some methods and override those properties and those methods. And we also saw how the init block works. And we saw visibility modifiers, the data class, and a bunch of things are here. All right, so if you don't have any questions from yesterday's class or previous class, we'll begin with today's class. So here's a normal simple file with the main function which prints some standard string text. So today we're going to talk about abstract classes, interfaces, and sealed classes. So let's begin. An abstract class is basically defined by using the abstract keyword, but what does it mean? So an abstract class is basically like a contract. So let's forget about abstract class for now and just create a class named as animal, right? And it's an empty class for now. It doesn't have anything. So let's give it some properties such as get the height of this animal and we declare a function using the fun keyword. That's it. And we have a method here, get weight. And that's also this empty method. So let's put some data over here. We'll say the height of the animal is, let's create a property here, variable height, and by default we assign it a value of 0 and we print the height here. Okay, and the same goes for the weight. Alright, so we just need to do this exercise before we start into the concept of an abstract class. So the weight will be 0 by default and we are just printing the weight here. Okay, so there's nothing much here, just some normal class animal with some parameters, with some properties and some methods. So let's create a class, say dog, which will extend the class animal. All right, and we need to add the constructor generation here, and here let's see what's the error. So it's basically saying that you cannot inherit this class because the type is final. So we have seen yesterday that all the classes in Kotlin are public and final by default. So we need to mark this class as open, and then only we can extend the animal class to dog class. We can override a few properties from here by marking them as open. So I can override this property, the height method, and let's put println statement here. Let's say the height is dollar symbol height. All right. So, but I want to override this property. I'll mark this as open, and then I will override the property of height over here. I'll give it a by default value of 0. Okay, so that's it for now. Let's try to call the height method on the dog class. So it's nothing major, just creating an object and calling the getHeight method, which will print the which is calling the super method here first, and then it's calling the executing this println statement. So it will print the height of animal is 0. Okay, let's run this. So it's printing 0 and 0, nothing fancy here. So now let's create another, let's make this function as abstract. So we'll see about that. So here we're getting a bit of a warning, so which means that RACT. So abstract functions by default do not have any body. So we go and remove the body for this. So an abstract function cannot have any body. They go without a body, and when we override them in the child class, in there we will define the body for this, or the implementation for this method. So there's also another rule that if a class has an abstract method, it should also be marked as abstract. So that is why I will remove open keyword, because all the abstract classes are by default open, so we don't need it. So modifier open is redundant because abstract is present. So we don't really need this open modifier here, because we use it to make the class extendable or inheritable, so we don't need it. So now here let's see what's the issue. So it says that the class dog is not abstract and does not implement the abstract place class member abstract1 get weight. So there is one more thing to keep in mind, that the abstract method must be explicitly be like, it should be necessarily be overridden in the child class, otherwise you will have an error. Okay, so let's just print a statement here that the weight of dog is weight. All right, so but it doesn't happen with this. So if I do not override this method, there will be no problem at all. I can go ahead and remove this. So there's no compilation error, nothing of the sort. But the important thing to keep in mind is that if I remove this method, I will get an error. So which means that this dog class is bound to the animal class, and it has a contract which it has to necessarily follow. This abstract keyword in the front of this method is adding a contract. So since we are extending an abstract class here, we have to fulfill that contract. So it's more of like a contract role here. All right, let's print this, and there is no super call here because we don't have a body on the abstract class. So if you try to call the abstract method, you will not be able to do so. So get weight. So you cannot call get weight on the super. You can only call height, and you can only call the get height and the weight. Right. So let's move this and let's call the get weight method here. Get weight. So we're not setting anything here. We're just trying to get and trying to understand how exactly does the abstract class bind a contract. And we can also have a setter method here which will set this value, and then we can print this value using the getter methods, but that's not a big issue. You can do it yourself as well. Alright, so this is basically in the abstract class. The things to keep in mind is that if a class has at least one abstract method, the class should be declared with an abstract keyword, and an abstract class is by default open in nature, so you don't really need to specify the open keyword here, which is not required. Even if you do, the compiler will give you a warning or a suggestion that you don't need this. And when you're extending the abstract class, you have to override the abstract properties or the methods. So let's say if this weight property is abstract in nature, I will have to override that property. I cannot go without overriding the weight property. I have to give it some kind of I have to override it. And the abstract properties will not be, you cannot assign some values to the abstract property, and here you'll have to declare date type as well. Okay, cool. So abstract methods do not have a body, and abstract variables or properties will not be able to, you cannot assign them some value, and they will have to be overridden. So that's the entire game around abstract keyword. I'll remove this for now. Don't really need it, but you get the idea, right? Okay, so that's it for the abstract classes. And let's come to interfaces and try to take a real world example. So interfaces are not classes. First of all, they are nothing related to classes, and you cannot instantiate them. Also, you cannot instantiate an abstract class. So, which means that if you, so I'll just go and remove this. Okay, so if you try to create an object of an animal class here, you cannot do that. So the compiler will also tell you this thing that you cannot create an instance of an abstract class. That's one important thing to keep in mind. You cannot instantiate, oh, I always mess up the spellings. So you cannot instantiate an abstract class or an interface, and an interface is not a class. Okay, cool. So let's take an example here. Let's create an interface using the interface keyword, and let me create non-click listener. Let's call it my on-click listener. All right. So here we define interface, and an interface can have abstract methods, and interface can have normal methods as well. So which means that interface can have methods which have some body or which are abstract in nature, and by default the method is abstract, so we don't need the abstract keyword with the methods. Okay, cool. So let's create a method here on click. All right, so we'll define the method using define keyword. That's it. So let's say there's a, so whenever, so interfaces are basically used whenever you want to do something when something happens. So I want to trigger something when something has happened. So when a button click has happened, I want to do some action. So I'll just try to print this here, like on clicked. Okay. Let's go ahead and create a class named as button, or let's just call it my button, and it will extend this interface which is my on click listener. And now we will override this method on click. Okay, and we'll print that button was clicked. Okay, so now let's create an object of this button class. And call the on click property of this button is my button. Alright, so let's run this program. I get that my button was clicked. So what is this? Okay, and then it is also calling the super method, which you can choose not to call, and you can remove it as well, but it's good to have a super call. So let's keep it for now. So that's basically I'm adding a listener to my button. Whenever a click is performed, it will trigger something over here. And I can even go ahead and create a method which does not have any body. It's like an abstract method, and I can choose to provide the abstract method body in this class, in my button class. So let's do it here. Override function on touch, println my button was touched. Alright, let's go and run this program after calling the touch button. Okay, so whenever an event is performed, use a click or a touch event, it's basically going in through the button, and then it is implementing some kind of an interface which is extending its properties, and you can have this kind of callback anywhere in your class wherever you want to do. So let me just quickly check if any of you have any questions. Okay, all going good so far. Okay, cool. So that is basically about the interfaces, and the important thing to keep in mind is that interface is not a class, and you cannot instantiate an interface, but it is used just like a listener, like a callback mechanism, which you can implement in your classes to get some callbacks. And all the classes in Kotlin are public and final by default. So, right, so let's create a property here. Let's call it or let's call it sensitivity. What is the sensitivity of this click or the touch? So we just define this value and let's try to initialize it and see what happens. So we are not able to initialize it, and by default all the properties are abstract in nature, which means you cannot initialize this property, and you will have to override those properties in your class which is implementing that interface. So here by this you can override your properties of the interfaces. Okay, and the important thing to keep in mind is that it is by default abstract in nature, which means that you don't really need to define that it is abstract. All the properties in the interfaces are abstract in nature, so that is why this is redundant. So redundant modality modifier, and we can remove it. And if we add it here, I always mess up the spellings. ABSTRACT. Okay, so here also by default the method is abstract and we don't need it. But if we choose to provide a body to this method, that's a different story. But by default the method will be abstract. And if the method is abstract, you have to override it. You cannot leave it there. Okay, cool. So let's jump on to the next part, which is sealed classes, and this is going to be the most interesting part of this session. So let's take a real world scenario where you have some kind of result coming in from the API. So you're having some kind of result, and it can be either like a success result from the API, and it can be either a success or it can be either an error. So either of those two things can happen. So now your result thing is limited by two values. So whenever this kind of situation occurs in Java, we remember to use enums. For this use case, we use an enums. So let's try to create this kind of scenario here. So I'll create an enum class here, and let me call it my result. All right, so there's nothing much over here, just a normal class, and it will have two values. One will be success and another will be error. So here you can see that the enums have a property that you can not define anything else. You know that this is fixed, that my result will have only two values, which will be success and error. And it can be, you can also do it for a class named as color. You are defining a few colors: red, blue, green, my color. So you're defining class name as color, my color, and you're defining some fixed amount of properties over here, which are fixed for color. So which you can access them like this: color dot red, blue, green. So you have fixed amount of values over here. And inside the enum classes, you can also declare some methods. You can also do that if you want to have that kind of functionality. But this is kind of some sort of a limitation here. Let's say I want to extend this green class to have some data in it. I cannot do that. So I will get an error. Let's say I want to extend this error class, put some error data, which will return me something of string type. So there is no functionality of that kind. So that is why we have sealed classes now, and let's see what is their functionality. So let me change this class to a normal class for now. And this, so this is a normal class, my result, default constructor, primary constructor, nothing doing nothing at all. And let's define a data class named as success, and it is extending my result. Since we are extending since it is a data class, we remember from yesterday that it has to have at least one property. So let's define some property here in the primary constructor, data of type string, and in a data class you have to write at least val or var. If you skip it, it will give you an error. So do remember to type whether your variable is mutable or immutable type. And let's see what is this error. So it is saying that this class is final. So we are missing the open keyword here. So now we can extend this class and then everything is fine. So let's create another class which is nothing much but just an error. So instead of data, I'll just type it error, and it can be a type of exception, it can be type of string, whatever you want it to be, anything like that. So now what I will do is whenever I get some data from the internet, I'll wrap it up as a result and pass the success scenario or the error scenario. If I get success, I also have the data along with me. If I get the error, I have the error along with me. So that's good enough. And I'm kind of generalizing everything whenever I make a network call. So let's create a scenario here that function get data from API. So I'm making an API call here. So let's assume I'm doing some network operation here, and after doing the network operation, it gives me some kind of result code. So let's say that this result code is 200, and can define that 200 result code means a success scenario, and whatever else otherwise we get an error. Okay, so this return when result code. So this is an example of an expression, a when expression, not a when statement. If it is 200, in that case I will return, so this method will return my result. So I will be returning here my result dot success. I can pass in some sample data, that some JSON value what I got from the internet, and I'll be getting it from here, this network operation. Otherwise, if whatever happens, I will return my result dot error scenario, and I can pass in some exception here. So it's java.lang.exception. Let me remove this. Okay, so I'm just passing in some exception here. All right, so that's it, and it's just a normal class. My result is just a normal class. It's an open class, so I can extend it. So I've created two classes here: a data class 1 success, data class 2 error, and I'm trying to have some kind of exhaustive operation where when I make the API call, I will get some result as success or error. So let me just try to get some result, and I'll use an expression here, get data from the internet. So it will return me either a success or a error scenario. So it will return me either success or an error. All right, so I go here, I'll type if data is a type of success, which is my result dot success. In that case, do something. Otherwise, if the data is my result dot error, in that case, do something. All right. So let me just complete the statements. Println success successfully got data from API. And I'll say error fetching data from API. All right, So let's see what is this error saying. Error does not have a companion object, thus must be initialized here. So you can just make a call to the primary constructor. Let's see what else can we do. Okay, I don't think that's what it means. Okay, so we are calling result here. It is supposed to be my result. And let's see what's the error here. Okay, we are using result here. It has to be my result. My result. Sorry, my bad. Okay, oops. We went into some other class. Alright, so this is some of the class. I don't know how did we land in here, but that's one of my preparation codes which I prepared before this class, so ignore it for now, guys. Okay, so let me comment this entire class. I don't want to fix the error here. Let me just check it out here. So my result of success, my result of error. Get data from API. Alright, so I get a success or I get an error. Once again, sorry for this mess up. Okay, so that's it. Okay, returning my result of success. If it is success, let's add an else case here, because since it is an expression we need an else case, but this will not make any sense. So let me just go ahead and type invalid result. We're gonna do something about this because we definitely know that the result can either be only of two types. It can either be success or it can either be error. So we'll do something about the else statement later. Okay, see what exactly is the issue. Let me just open the file and see. Okay, so I'm just missing the is statement here. Sorry. So is if the result is a success, if the result is an error. Alright, so if the result is success, I'll print this. If the result is an error, I'll miss this. Sorry about the mess up, but alright. Okay, so I hope you're understanding it. I'll just run it through again. So we just have a class here, a simple class, and it has two data classes which are extending it. So we have a success class here, and we have an error class here. So that means we have two kinds of results. Either it can be error or either it can be a success. Now we have some method here which will do some operation and fetch some data from the API, and it will return a result to us, which will basically be a success or an error kind of object. And if the result code is 200, we'll return success, otherwise we'll return error, and which we can see here. But let's remove this else and we'll get an error over here. So when statement is giving us an error that the when expression must be exhaustive, add the necessary else branch. So compiler is not able to know that there can be only two types of result. It can be success or error. So there is nothing else to do and we just are stuck with this else condition here, and we don't know what to do in here, but we have it. So let's just keep it for now, and we'll look at it in the future. So let's run this program with the success result code 200. Alright, so successfully got the data from the API, and let's change it to 201. In this case, we'll get an error while fetching data from the API. Alright, cool. So now let's say that we have got another requirement over the time, and we need to add some other kind of scenario here, that let's say if there is some kind of progress going on, we need to update that as well. So how much percentage it is completed, that can be stored in an integer value, and again it will be type of my result. Alright, so that's it. So now in this case, I have updated the in progress here, and I will add that if the result code is specifically 201, in that case it will be in progress, and otherwise it will be an error. So I go ahead, add a condition 201, that my result dot in progress, and I pass in some value which I have got from, which I am getting from here, that the progress is 20% or whatever it is. So now let's run this program and see what happens. So we are still getting an invalid result here. We are getting an invalid result. However, this should not be the case. We should be getting in progress. And this is our result. So since the result is not a success, not an error, we are going to the else branch here. And it can happen anytime. But let's see what if we make this class a sealed class. From normal class, let's make it this class a sealed class. And sealed classes are basically just a kind of an extension to enums, and they have better functionality, and the compiler knows that okay, this is it, and nothing else can be a part of a sealed class other than this. So now let's go back and see what happens. Alright, okay, sealed class my result. Okay, cool. So here let's remove this else statement. So now again we're getting error here. When expression must be exhaustive, add the necessary in progress branch. So here we're explicitly getting that you have to add this in progress part, so that we don't run into these problems where we find ourselves getting something else. When we are inputting something, we're getting an invalid result. We should be getting the in progress result. So here the sealed classes make sense actually, and that is kind of the history why the sealed class is necessary in the first place. So thanks for bearing with me to get to know the entire story behind it. Alright, so let's move this and add in here println statement that in progress. Okay, so let's run this program again. And we're getting that the result is in progress. Alright, fair enough. Now let's say we get another requirement that if the value is 202, then it should be said that on hold, that we are putting this task on hold, and we'll do it sometime later. So if the value is 202, I'll just say I'll just add some value here, data class here, on hold, and there's no particular reason, or there can be some hold reason here, whatever we're getting from the network, and then that's it. And whenever 202 happens, I can just go ahead and say my result on hold, and whatever is the reason, we can say that not a priority for now, so we are not doing it. PRIORITY. Okay, cool. So now you can see when you go back up, so wherever you'll be using the sealed class, you will get an error here. It will be saying that you're missing some kind of a statement here, which was not the case with the normal class. So here it is kind of suggesting me that I should be adding the on hold condition here. Sorry. When expression must be exhaustive, add the necessary on hold. So I can just go ahead, press Alt Enter, and add the remaining branches. So they can be 1, 2, or 3. How many number of branches are there? The Kotlin compiler knows that in my sealed class, these are that this condition is complete or not complete, and so I don't even have to add an else statement in when expression, which otherwise is an important part. I have to do that. I hope you are trying to understand what exactly I'm trying to say in here. It got a little bit messed up in between, but I believe that you are getting the idea. So let's run this program and provide the value of 202 here. Let's run this program. So we get that the result is on hold. So let's see if you have any questions. Difference between abstract class and interface in Kotlin. All right. So basically, ideal scenario to use to choose whether to use an abstract class or an interface would be if you are doing something like which is acting some kind of a listener or some kind of a callback scenario, you should be using some interface which is more of like a behavior which is getting triggered when you do something, and not by defining the contracts. If you have to define a contract that this class should behave in a certain manner, then in that case you can use an abstract class to define a contract for that. And just to keep in mind that you can extend multiple interfaces, and that should not be a problem for you as well. Otherwise, you can extend only one abstract class, but let me just check that out. Let me create another class here, ABC. I'm just trying to extend it over here. So yeah, I can extend, I cannot. So I cannot extend multiple classes, right? I cannot do that. So, but I can extend multiple interfaces as well, right? So let me create an interface here, interface ABC1, and I can extend it here, ABC1. So I can extend multiple interfaces, but I cannot extend multiple classes. So that's again one of the reasons you have to take care. So the main thing is that if you are defining some sort of contract that this class has to work in some particular manner, so in that case it makes sense to use an abstract class. Otherwise, mostly you will be using an interface to define some kind of a callback property or a listener mechanism. Okay, so this is it for this class. We covered all the things, and I believe this is the last class, so uh, if you have any questions, please ask them straight away, and I'll be happy to answer. So I'll just wait on for you to have, if you have any more questions. And I hope I answered your question about the abstract class and the interface. All right then. So I think cool. Thank you, Kapil. So I believe that is it for this class. If you have any questions or any doubts, please do not forget that you can always subscribe to this channel, and I'll keep making new videos on Kotlin and Android app development. So I already have a list of few videos which I am preparing right now. But if you have anything in mind that you want to ask in particular, I can make a video on that and try to explain you what exactly it means. If you have some kind of a scenario which you want to know, or something which you have in mind, you already have the access to the Facebook group, which is only for the members who registered for this course. So you can ask your questions in their Facebook group as well. So yeah, so this is not a goodbye. This is like something where we are starting next off, and in future also, in near future, if I launch any more courses on Android development, I'll definitely let you know. Cool. So thank you for joining this course. Thank you very much, and be must and keep rocking until then. See ya. Bye. And also, this code will be available on GitHub, so don't worry about it. I'll post the link in the GitHub very soon.